Good evening, everyone. I have the immense pleasure of introducing Jon Iwata this evening. Many in our profession know Jon from his time at IBM, where for over 35 years he rose from intern to senior vice president and chief brand officer. And for all those scholars out there, yes, you did hear me correctly. He did start as an intern. Two things from his career demonstrate why Jon is being honored tonight. The first is that he was an advisor, not to one, not to two, but to three IBM CEOs, Lou Gerstner, Sam Palmisano, and Ginny Rometty. Each of them transformed IBM during their tenure as CEO, but each relied on Jon as a trusted partner and counselor. The second reason for the honor this evening is it's very rare for a B2B brand to become a household name, let alone to have a meaningful connection with the masses. Yet right in the midst of the financial crisis of 2008, IBM initiated a conversation with the world about smarter energy, smarter healthcare, smarter cities, smarter almost everything. It opened our eyes to a world that today we recognize as if it were inevitable. But back then it took vision and courage for IBM to invest in the Smarter Planet strategy. Jon was its architect. And it doesn't stop there. Since retiring, he has gone on to undertake what arguably may become his life's most important work. After IBM, Jon became an executive fellow at Yale School of Management. And that could have been a pleasant detour into campus life, sitting in classes and so on. No, Jon's curiosity about the how of stakeholder capitalism led him to interview more than 100 CEOs, and it has turned it into a formal program launched at Yale last fall, which Jon co-leads with faculty. Its mission is to develop new thinking that helps leaders build businesses that are, and I quote, more responsible and enduring, distinctive in character and authentic in action. And finally, in 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, Jon worked with CEOs of companies including Nike, Walmart, American Express, Pfizer, and Starbucks to form the Data and Trust Alliance. Jon leads this organization too, an organization which develops data and AI practices, really incredibly timely right now. And to give you an idea of the importance of this work, the output of the Alliance's first project was algorithmic anti-bias safeguards adopted by some of the largest employers in the world. So I could hardly call Jon retired, and I suspect that there is a lot more to come in his career. But that's because this is the person that I've had the pleasure of knowing for almost 20 years. So now let's hear a little more about Jon from some other individuals.
Jon was working way down below in the corporate communications department. I didn't know him. I brought in a senior communications person, and I told him, you need to build a team. And he came to me one day and he said, I've discovered a guy who's just absolutely terrific.
In terms of words I'd use to describe Jon, I'm not sure any of these are just like single words, but a wonderful human being, to start with, a fun person to work with, a natural collaborator, great listener.
Jon is an observer, he's a writer, he's strategic, he's also a nurturer of talent, people, and institutions.
Jon is always precise. He is pragmatic too, but he balances that with a deep sense of care for the needs of those around him.
Things people should know about Jon that might not be obvious. One that comes to mind for me is development of younger people.
Since moment one, Jon just communicated with a demeanor and a gravitas and just a calm and grounded attitude that just communicated what I now know to be his general approach to work and to life.
Integrity also means being responsible and trustworthy, and having served a series of multiple CEOs at IBM, obviously not a simple task, tells you that he earned the trust of many, many different styles of leadership, and that's amazing. And I think, to me, these various definitions of integrity, Jon really captures them all.
Jon is analytical. I mean, he really goes after the truth. You know, there are lots of people who are good analysts. And there are lots of people who claim to be creative. Jon really does marry them in an amazing way.
Jon seeks to observe what's true about the world, and then he overlays that with what people and leaders in institutions can do to meaningfully change it to be better.
Extraordinary. And I'm sure everybody looking at that realizes the exceptional impact Jon has had on so many people's lives and on our profession. So Jon, it is truly a privilege to honor you with the Larry Foster Award for Integrity and Public Communications. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you, Aedhmar. Thank you so much. And thank you, Larry. Thank you, Marie, Denise, and everybody associated with the Page Center. Watching that video here, I'm very moved and very grateful for all of the different leaders that I have known and continue to work with over the years. Just amazing people from every field, and I'm so grateful. I have to say, again, a lot of this is due to the work that I did in collaboration with so many colleagues at IBM and our partners over the years. And then more recently at Yale and Cooper Hewitt and many other organizations I'm privileged to be with. So my thanks to them, my thanks to my family, who thought I retired 4 years ago and would begin to do other things. And that's just not how it worked. And finally, I want to thank again the Page Center, not only for this honor, but most importantly, for the vital work that it does. And we've been reminded of that tonight. As will be said repeatedly this evening, I believe integrity in every form of public communication, in media, in content, in business and education, and in public discourse is needed now more than ever, because it's never been more at risk. So the work is so important. And to be in association with the other honorees this evening's and in the past is such a great honor. I'm very, very grateful. Thank you.
Thanks, Jon. So this gets to be the fun part. I have several questions that have been submitted by those that are watching us this evening. But I wanted to start with one of my own before I get into that. And it's to do with AI. You know, there's been a thread in your career that's remained a constant, and that's the use of artificial intelligence. But today, AI is becoming more mainstream with the rollout of ChatGPT and other forms of generative AI. So can you share with us your perspective on ChatGPT and the impact it'll have on things like trust and integrity in our industry?
Yes, we've been in moments like this in the history of technology, and now and then, and we're in one of those moments now, when a new technology sort of bursts on the scene and it dominates interest and conversation from the kitchen table to the boardroom. And for some of us, we remember that in the 90s with the internet, and later with mobile devices and social media, certainly. And so it is now with AI, and particularly, as you said, Aedhmar, ChatGPT and other forms of generative AI. But I think the broader topic is AI now has reached the point where it feels like it is going to be used in life and in business and in every facet of our activity, just like these other technologies. And like the patterns of history, there is value and promise, and then there's risk and hazard, and there's lots of overclaiming and speculation. That's all part of it. So I think this is a wonderful opportunity for all of us in business and in technology and in society to sort of draw upon those lessons some of us, most of us have lived through. Like, where is the value and what are some of those unintended consequences? And in the case of generative AI, there are many. I mean, the very nature of can you believe what this capability is generating is at the core of it. You know, where does this come from? Unlike traditional search engines, as we all know, at least you know the source. It points you to a website, it points you to an article. But by its very nature, generative AI is synthesizing its own. It's generating its own content, its own data. So it's too early to tell what the real benefits will be. There are clearly some potentially to make things easier, to make them faster, to make them perhaps better, to perhaps eliminate some biases. But the risks are apparent. And given our conversation tonight about integrity, the trustworthiness of what comes out of these systems is probably the most crucial issue.
So building on that, actually, there's a question from Mike Azzi, a former colleague, but now working at Metal. His question was about how will the growing role of AI impact the field of corporate communications and communications careers specifically. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. Thanks, Mike, for the question. Again, I liken it to prior technologies. Let's take social media. I think the impact, if I just categorize them, one, is it likely that every company, your company and every company will be using, in this case, AI? And I think that's yes. I think that the company will use AI in its operations and its product development, who knows where. And that for the communicator means that the brand or the reputation of that company may be strengthened or weakened because of the trustworthiness and the unintended consequences of these systems. So that's another factor in the work of communicators, which is, trust of the brand and the company. The second is your own use, our own use as professionals. Can you imagine today being in the marketing, communications, public affairs field and not have mastery of social media? Well, back when it first burst on the scene, it was not apparent that we would be using it in our own work. And I believe that will certainly be the case in AI. How will we use it in our work to create, new forms of value? Last point I'd make here is there's a lot of, concern about AI, particularly generative AI, destroying jobs. And is that going to happen to communications professionals, but frankly, a lot of, knowledge workers in every field? And again, if you study the patterns of history about job creation and jobs that do get eliminated, one lesson is this. It's highly likely that you will not be replaced by a robot or generative AI. You're probably going to be replaced more likely by somebody who knows how to use that new tool to advance, the work of the profession. So it's in all of our interests here to not be in denial about it, to learn about it, and practice responsibility, but to use it to hopefully advance our work.
I think when you reference the past of social media, it's also very true to consider that in the future, how it's applied is never possibly why it was really invented, and the same is probably true of AI in terms of what we will look back on in the next 10 years. The next question is from Donna Oshida, a faculty member at the University of San Francisco, and she's referencing social media. We have a new generation of students who've been influenced by social media, and particularly influencers with their fame. And her question is that there are fewer role models with integrity gaining the same sort of notoriety as influencers are. So how would you recommend they build their own personal brand and a brand with integrity?
The same way you would build your reputation prior to any technology, and that is to be a person of good character and to be consistent and authentic wherever you are and in every interaction you have. And now in social media, to be yourself there, and hopefully that means that that's a person that people trust, a person who doesn't have to represent themselves one way in one moment and a different way in another moment, because those people are very busy trying to keep track of what they said to this one or that one. So I know that sounds fundamental or perhaps old-fashioned, but social media and transparency is such that we can't have multiple versions of ourselves. And therefore, probably the best investment one can make in having a good reputation is to build your own character.
Absolutely. The next question is from Emmeline Theorold. She's a student from Boston University. She asked, do you think that companies should be more involved in the creation of academic curriculum so that their future managers can be better equipped to enter the corporate world? So I guess that sort of speaks to your work both at Yale and with the Data Alliance.
Yes, and I think specifically to what I've learned by spending time with my academic colleagues at Yale is the academy is respected, and rightly so, because of its independence and it's the purity of its research mission. And therefore, as much as those of us in practice might say that a lot of what comes out of universities may be too theoretical, or it's hard to apply some of that deep scholarship, it's valuable. And I think that what I've learned and seen, and you see everywhere in the academy, I think, and Page Center is an example of that, are mechanisms of collaboration and mechanisms where the academic leadership understands sort of the realities of business or the realities of society, and that informs the scholarship. And vice versa, the practitioners of the world here get to see some of the underlying concepts and the new understandings that can be applied, hopefully rapidly, into business practice and close that gap of application too. So I really would respect those that boundary line between what practitioners do well and what the academic community does, so exceptionally well.
So I'd love to switch gears a little bit, Jon, and talk specifically about the Data and Trust Alliance. Maybe you could speak a little bit to what comes next. I spoke a little bit about how it was launched and the first foray in terms of, with major employers in the world. Could you speak a little bit to what you see as being on the horizon in the next year to 5 years for the Alliance?
Yes, the Data and Trust Alliance was formed as you recounted here, sort of at the beginning of the pandemic by a core group of CEOs, some of whom you mentioned. And it came out of a concern they had that their companies, but arguably every industry and every company eventually will be making big investments and big bets on data and AI as a source of advantage of one type or another. But since this technology has great promise, it also has great impacts, great risks involved, economic, reputational, to society. And therefore, these companies or these CEOs got together to say, let's accelerate our learning from each other if we form this new organization. And we have one KPI and always have, which is adoption of practices by practitioners inside of these companies and beyond. And a couple of things that I would offer from our learning here without talking about too many specifics of the Alliance, not because they're confidential, because they may not be as relevant. I'd say that one is there is a new literacy that needs to be gained, created, and then gained by not just the technical people or the policy people, but by everybody in every business and beyond. But if you just think about those in business, the literacy of AI, the literacy of responsible usage is something that we've seen beginning before in our history, which is we don't understand these terms, we don't understand these concepts, so we need to, if we're going to use the technology wisely. Give you an example of that. I mean, when you say data, immediately people might think of privacy and data security and cybersecurity. But one piece of vocabulary that I would offer is algorithmic safety. Because the data today, all these AI systems are trained on data sets, and those data sets have to be selected by individuals, call them data scientists. And these algorithms are not written 100% by humans any longer. You know, these technologies are called machine learning and deep learning for a reason. They learn from the data. They're trained on the data. And then when sort of they're in production environments or they're operating, they learn from all the interactions they have with new data, with people. And therefore, algorithmic safety is a new concept which says we really have to understand why and how these algorithms are making their recommendations or making their determinations. And that's a whole new field. And it's not just for the data scientists. I'll give you one other thing because I can go on about this for a while. Some of us remember when the internet happened, and you may recall this, that companies one day said, wow, we have so many websites, we need to have one. We need to somebody needs to get hold of this thing because it's out of control. We have too many websites. We need just to have one homepage. And I believe I caught that responsibility at IBM back in the 90s. Well, you do the audit, you do the inventory, and you come back one day and say, you know how many websites we have? Thousands. We have them by country. We have them by functional area. We have thousands of them. And the answer was, how could this have happened? It happened because of two things. The internet became hot, and it was really easy to stand up a website. Think about it today. How many parts of your company have hired or are hiring data scientists? Why? Because data is hot and AI is hot, and I need to get with it and figure out how to use this, so I'm going to go get a data scientist. What does a data scientist do? Well, like a website person, they're going to build a website. Data scientist starts to build a model, and the model depends on data. And they start collecting data and feeding their model, training their model. And so what's happened here, and we validated this within the Data and Trust Alliance, is that inside of companies, there is so much inconsistency of data standards, of data quality, which is very important for the performance and trustworthiness of the AI systems. So this is not a reason to be alarmed. But it's just a reminder that now we have to accelerate, even as we accelerate experimenting with AI and perhaps using it, we need to also accelerate governance, control systems, oversight. And that's going to have to be at the C-suite level and even at the board level. And I do think that having learned those lessons of the past 25 years or whatever, business leaders are not going to wait. They're going to do that at the same time, which is a cause for optimism.
Congratulations again on a brilliant career and this truly well-deserved award. Thank you.
Thank you, Aedhmar. Thank you very much.